Are we missing a counselor? Askin.
For those
Be on the record. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call to order the October 15th, 2024 Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Naxted,
Here.
Board Member Sonart,
Here.
Board Member Dothit,
Here.
Board Member Askin,
Here.
Board Member Daniel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on to item C, agenda item C, approval of the minutes. We're going to have 3 of these. May I have a motion to approve the June 20, 2022 Hanson Appeal Board of Adjustment hearing minutes? Board Member Dothit.
I'll move to approve June 20th, 2022 Hanson approval of minutes.
You have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any revisions to the minutes? And are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing no objection, the June 20th, 2022 Hanson Appeal Board of Adjustment hearing minutes are approved. That gets us to the second one. May I have a motion to approve the June 20th, 2022 Malloy Schmidt Board of Adjustment hearing minutes?
I move to approve the June 20th, 2022 Malloy Schmidt appeal. Minutes.
Okay, are there any revisions to the minutes or any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing or seeing no objections, the June 20th, 2022 Board of Adjustment Malloy Schmidt Board of Adjustment hearing minutes are approved. Now, may I have a motion to approve the August 21st, 2024 Carlisle Board of Adjustment hearing minutes?
Move to approve the August 21st, 2024 Carlisle minutes.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any revisions to the minutes or any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing no objections, the August 21st, 2024 Board of Adjustment, Carlisle Board of Adjustment hearing minutes are approved. That brings us to the opening statement. I have a prepared statement here, basically the rules of the road for what we're going to be doing this evening. The Board of Adjustment hearing will be conducted in compliance with the City of Kenai Code, reasonable regulations of the board, and other applicable law. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. The hearing is public, is being recorded, and being live streamed to the city's YouTube channel. All persons presenting evidence and testimony shall do so under oath administered by the clerk. This hearing will be conducted less formally with regard to rules of evidence and other court rules of procedure than in a judicial courtroom. This hearing before the board is de novo. The board will review both the facts and the law presented during the hearing and submitted timely. New tangible evidence not timely submitted to the city clerk will normally not be submitted. All evidence considered in this matter should be in the record before the board as previously provided to the parties. The appellant or party applying to the board has a burden of proof to show entitlement to relief. Members of the public may have 5 minutes for each to address the board prior to the beginning of the party's presentation. Each party will be allowed 30 minutes to present its case. During the party's presentation of the case, the parties may call witnesses. Cross-examination will not be allowed during the party's presentation of the case. Any witness that testifies during the presentation of the case by either party, unless excused by the board with concurrence of the parties, must remain available to be called during rebuttal, at which time cross-examination may occur. Each party will be allowed 10 minutes for rebuttal. Any requested revision to the agenda or procedures by a party must be made to the board and approved by the board immediately following the conclusion of this statement. Upon recognition by the chair, board members may question the parties and their witnesses. Questioning by the board may take place at any time before the hearing is closed. Questioning by the board and responsive answers will not be counted against parties' time. The board requires a quorum of 4 and a majority of the quorum to make a decision. The board must issue a written decision within 30 days of the hearing date explaining its decision. The decision will indicate how each board member voted. The board may reverse, remand, or affirm, wholly or in part, or may modify the order, requirement, decision, or determination as ought to be made, and to that end shall have the powers of the body from whom the appeal is taken. The board may undertake deliberation immediately upon conclusion of the hearing on appeal, or may take the matter under advisement and meet at such other time as is convenient for deliberations until a decision is rendered. Are there any questions to those rules? Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Yes, good afternoon, I guess, maybe early evening. My name is Joe Levesque, and I've been retained by the city to assist the Board of Adjustment in this appeal hearing. And before the Board of Adjustment begins, I'd like to ask just a few questions. First, to the clerk, have all the notices gone out to the surrounding property owners?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, all property owners within 500 feet of the property at question have been noticed. For both occasions, they received 2 notices, one for the conditional use permit and one for the variance, and all parties who participated in the matter before the Planning and Zoning Commission were also noticed.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, does anybody on the Board of Adjustment have a conflict of interest which they would like to disclose? And, you know, mostly for municipalities, we're talking about substantial financial conflicts of interest. Does anybody have one of those that they'd like to disclose? Okay, my final question is, has anyone on the Board of Adjustment met or talked with anybody that's involved in this case? That would be the city attorney, Scott Bloom. That would be the other party, Mr. Moses and his client. Nothing to disclose? Okay, very good. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Before we proceed to, prior to starting, I understood that it was, perhaps the intent was to combine the 2 presentations into one. Is that something that somebody here would like to suggest?
Thank you. So for the record, Richard Moses on behalf of the appellant. As you can imagine, as you've probably seen in your packet, the testimony is virtually identical for each of these 2 hearings. And so if everyone's okay, just kind of combining it and just putting on each witness once, subject to recall later if necessary, and then 2 separate closing arguments if necessary. I believe it'll streamline things. I believe it'll make things faster. And I'm certainly not asking to stack, you know, both 30-minute cases together and go for an hour. I think I could comfortably get done in the 30 minutes regardless, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think then we'll proceed to do both of them. However, and I'm kind of doing this on the fly, you know, as we get toward the end, if it's necessary for either party to have a little more time, because we are combining them, perhaps we could entertain that, but we'll see. Okay. Does that work?
Yes, thank you, Board Chair Naxted. So my only question is, would you like the city planner, generally these hearings proceed with a staff report. He was planning on reading the staff report for the variance for this hearing and then waiting till the next hearing to read the staff report for the conditional use permit. We can do it twice if that's the preference. So read the staff report for the variance and then go right into the staff report for the conditional use permit, or would you like us to separate those somewhat?
Again, Richard Moses for the record, I don't see a reason to separate that unless obviously if the body feels differently.
I think it would be my preference, and I could ask the board here what you want to do, but I think that getting both staff reports is important because they have different findings and they're different findings. So I think that it would be appropriate to do one and then do the second one if we're going to combine these. Does anybody with the board have any objections to doing it that way?
And, sorry, just to be clear, Brandon from the planning department has condensed his staff reports. I don't think it will be an issue, but with doing both at the same time, there's a slight chance he might run over the 15 minutes. And I just want to make sure there's a little bit of allowance if we're going to combine 2 staff reports into one for that.
There isn't by this board, and I'm saying that because I was anticipating that either party here might also need a few extra minutes depending on what you're presenting. So that works for everybody here? Okay. Anything else?
Sorry, one more thing. I just want to make sure it's clear to the public that if they want to comment on either, they're only going to have one opportunity then. And just make sure we clarify that for anybody from the public that wants to comment.
Okay, well, I can make that announcement later, but since we're here and we're talking about it, when we do get to the public comments, you can have the opportunity to speak on both of them, which is almost the same thing, I think. And if we feel for some reason you need some additional time, we can consider that time. Okay, so moving on now, we have the swearing in of persons providing testimony. Would the city clerk now swear in all persons who will be providing testimony?
Will all persons who will be providing testimony please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this case now before this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first, it'll be the appeal before the Board of Adjustment is appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission action denying an application of a variance permit and a conditional use permit for a marijuana retail store to be located at 11888 Kenai Spur Highway number 3, Kenai, Alaska. So at this point, we'll go to public comments. Are there any members from the public who would like to address the Board of Adjustment at this time? If you do, please come forward, state your name, and I think you'll have to turn on the mic.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing us tonight. My name is Tia Winger. I live in Kenai, right behind this proposed location. My neighborhood came during the planning and zoning in opposition to this due to concerns on zoning, the closeness, proximity to the neighborhood, the proximity and the closeness that there is to both the Little League field and the Boys and Girls Club across the street. Our neighborhood gets directly impacted by the dip net fishery. We see a lot of ATVs cruising all through there. Another concern would be the safety impact that we would see in this neighborhood from just the point of view of the PU fishery. The homeless people that we see, we feel that through years of watching zoning changes, it's something that the city's always done very diligently. Your planning and zoning listened to all of the testimony that night, and their ruling was to deny this. And I would hope that you guys would look at this, look at the presentation. This isn't about being equal. This isn't about being fair because somebody bought something ahead of time. This is looking at your zoning laws, your marijuana laws, that a lot of time and effort was put into by people on this body and previous bodies. So representing our neighborhood, there is another comment in your packet that was put in there by Nancy Wiles. She is unable to be here as well as many other neighbors, and she just wanted to make sure that that comment of hers showing that she is directly impacted and that she too would not like to see this reversed is acknowledged by the body. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions from any members of the board for Ms. Winger? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this issue? Okay, I see no more. So that brings us to staff report. Interim Planning Director McElray, and you have two presentations.
Thank you, Chair Nackstead. This is a variance permit application request for the reduction of the buffering distance within a conditional use permit to allow a retail marijuana store. The applicants are Troy and Sandra Millhouse. The physical address is 11888 Kenai Spur Highway. It is a 1.67 acre lot. Current zoning is general commercial. It is improved with unoccupied commercial structures. The applicants have submitted a variance permit application seeking relief from Kenai Municipal Code, KMC, subsection 14.20.330F, requesting the buffer distance be adjusted such that the proposed marijuana retail store be considered. A commercial marijuana establishment, CME, must comply with KMC Section 14.20.330 standards for commercial marijuana establishments, which in part reads that no CME shall be permitted within 500 feet of a recreational or youth center as measured in this instance from the closest interior wall segregating the CME from other uses within the structure to the outer boundaries of a recreational or youth center. KMC defines a recreational or youth center as a building, structure, athletic playing field, or playground run or created by a local government or the state to provide athletic, recreational, or leisure activities for minors, or operated by a public or private organization licensed to provide shelter, training, or guidance for persons under 21 years of age. Prior to granting a variance permit, the board must find that all of the conditions have been met as set forth in KMC subsection 14.20.180C. Variance permit review criteria. Criteria 1, special conditions or circumstances are present which are peculiar to the land or structures involved which are not applicable to other structures or lands in the same land use or zoning district. The applicants argue they purchased the property based on initial measurements from the former planning director that the property was outside of the buffer zone. However, staff finds no special conditions peculiar to the land or the structures. Criteria 2, the special conditions or circumstances have not been caused by actions of the applicant, and such conditions and circumstances do not merely constitute pecuniary hardship or inconvenience. The applicants claim a reliance on the planning director's initial measurements, but staff determines the hardship is based on the applicant's actions, not an external circumstance. Furthermore, the inability to operate a commercial marijuana establishment does not substantially diminish the economic opportunity for the subject property. In other words, the subject property is suitable for a wide range of commercial business. Criteria 3, the granting of the variance shall not authorize a use that is not a permitted principal use in the zoning district in which the property is located. Pursuant to KMC Section 14.22.010 Land Use Table, a retail marijuana store is not a permitted principal use in the general commercial zoning district, but instead requires a conditional use permit in this and all other zoning districts. Therefore, a variance cannot be granted to a commercial marijuana establishment. Criteria 4, the granting of a variance shall be the minimum variance that will provide for the reasonable use of the land and/or structure. A variance is not necessary for the reasonable use of the subject property. As it currently stands, the subject property is able to accommodate a wide variety of commercial businesses. Criteria 5, the granting of a variance shall not be based upon other non-conforming land uses or structures within the same land use or zoning district. The applicants have suggested that another CME was allowed a variance within 250 feet of a recreation or youth center in a previous criteria response. However, the city has never granted a variance of any kind for a CME as it is a conditional use, not a permitted principal use. Therefore, staff finds that the current request does not meet this criterion. Staff finds the proposed variance permit application requesting buffer zone adjustments does not meet the criteria for issuance of a variance permit as set forth in KMC subsection 14.20.180C, and hereby recommends that the Board of Adjustment deny the proposed variance permit application.
Just, Board Chair Naxted, do you want to ask any questions before we go into the next one, or do you want him to go?
I do. Well, I want to open it up for the board to ask questions. I was just making sure that he was done with that portion of it.
That does conclude
Okay,
the
that includes
variance.
that. Does the board have any questions of the planner? Thank you. Go ahead and proceed.
This is a conditional use permit application for the operation of a retail marijuana store. The applicants, can I say are read into record?
Sorry,
Can I say the applicants and the address have all been read into record, or?
if you want, or
The applicants are Troy and Sandra Millhouse. The physical address is 11888 Kenai Spur Highway. It is a 1.67 acre lot. Current zoning is general commercial. It is improved with unoccupied commercial structures. Pursuant to Kenai Municipal Code, KMC, subsection 14.20.150A, the intent of a conditional use permit is to allow some uses that may be compatible with the designated principal uses in specific zoning districts, provided certain conditions are met. Prior to granting a conditional use permit, the board must determine that the identified criteria as outlined in KMC 14.20.150E conditional use permits review criteria are met. Criteria 1, the use is consistent with the purpose of this chapter and the purposes and intent of the zoning district. Given the preceding variance permit application not meeting required criteria, staff believes that pursuant to KMC 14.20.330F2, the findings cannot be made that the proposed marijuana retail store is consistent with the purpose of this chapter or the intent of the zoning district. Criteria 2, the economic and non-economic value of the adjoining property and neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. The proposed store is not expected to impair the economic or non-economic value of the nearby properties. The building's renovation and commercial activity would align with the property's historic commercial use. Criteria 3, the proposed use is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. The land use plan from the 2016 comprehensive plan identifies the subject property with a general commercial land use classification supporting retail, service, and office businesses. It also aligns with the goals to enhance the quality of life, reuse vacant commercial buildings, and promote community development. Public services and facilities, criteria 4, public services and facilities are adequate to serve the proposed use. City water and sewer are on-site, as is natural gas and electric. Access is off the Kenai Spur Highway, a state-maintained right-of-way with no anticipated impact to traffic. Existing parking is adequate for the proposed use. Criteria 5, the proposed use would not be harmful to the public safety, health, or welfare. Due to the preceding variance permit application not meeting required criteria, staff believes the proposed use raises concerns regarding public safety, health, and welfare. KMC 14.20.330F set out minimum buffer distances that separate commercial marijuana establishments from other uses such as schools, churches, and recreation or youth centers to protect public health, safety, and welfare. The proposed location of the commercial marijuana establishment does not meet these buffer requirements. That's shown on page 47 of your packet. And if you turn to page 47, you can see measurements from the interior wall that separates the proposed commercial marijuana establishment from the other units in the building to the outer boundaries of both of the parcels that have the recreation or youth facilities on them, the ball fields, in other words. Criteria 6, any and all specific conditions deemed necessary by the board to fulfill the above-mentioned conditions. These may include, but are not limited to, measures relative to access, screening, site development, building design, operation of the use, and other similar aspects related to the proposed use. Pursuant to KMC 14.20.330, standards for commercial marijuana establishments, the following conditions apply to all retail marijuana stores. On-site consumption is prohibited on the premises of the proposed commercial marijuana establishment. The proposed retail marijuana store shall not emit an odor detectable by the public from outside the establishment. The proposed marijuana establishment may not conduct business on or allow any customer or consumer to access the licensed premises between the hours of 5 and 8 a.m. daily. Staff finds that the proposed CUP application for the operation of an approximately 1,600 square foot retail marijuana store within the existing approximately 9,332 square foot commercial building on government lots 19, 20, and 21, Section 6, Township 5 North, Range 11 West, Seward Meridian, Kenai, located at 11888 Kenai Spur Highway, does not meet the required criteria and conditions for issuance of a conditional use permit as set forth in subsections E1 through E6 of KMC 14.20.150 and KMC 14.20.330 standards for commercial marijuana establishment, and hereby recommends that the Board of Adjustment deny the conditional use permit application. This concludes staff's report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Does any member of the board have any questions? Seeing none, that brings us to appellant Troy Millhouse, represented by attorney Richard Moses. Mr. Moses, you have 30 minutes to present your case.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? So first, we're going to call Sandra Millhouse to testify. Ms. Millhouse, have you brought a statement with you here today?
Yes, thank you.
Would you like to go and read that?
Yes, please. Sandra Millhouse for the record. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. At the last meeting, there were a number of misconceptions voiced about myself and my company that I wanted to clear up. I'm sorry, I get nervous public speaking. The first was that I'm not from here. I'm actually a fourth-generation Alaskan and Alaska native. I was born and raised in Anchorage, raised my children in Wasilla, and we've spent every summer on the Kenai Peninsula. I caught my first fish at 5 on the Moose River, and my Aunt Ruthie and Uncle Earl Towner were some of the first settlers in this area. The second was that I was going to have some affiliation with a drug house in the neighborhood behind my property. I hate heroin pills and fentanyl as much as everyone else. In reality, the cameras that we have at our locations in Wasilla and Anchorage have been extremely helpful to law enforcement. It was said that my shop would also create traffic and noise. Unfortunately, when you purchase property next to commercial industrial locations, there is going to be traffic and noise. I live on Wasilla Lake, and there's a bar on the other side of the lake. Sometimes we're rocking out till 1 a.m. whether we like it or not. The third was that I was in some way being defamatory to Linda Mitchell, the former director of city planning. On the contrary, I had a lot of respect for her because when we spoke, she had taken accountability for the mistake she had made and apologized. She then informed me of a dispensary that was operating out of code as a remedy to the mistake. When Linda originally called me and said the strip mall would work, I was so excited. I told my future business partner, my mom, my contractor, my hairdresser, my family, and my store managers. The Mat-Su Borough have been so difficult to work with, I couldn't believe how helpful the Kenai Borough was being. I'm disappointed now to hear that there is a letter saying that was not what I was told. I'm a big community supporter. In the Valley, there are hundreds of young adults that know me as Mama Millhouse. I've spent the last 20 years as a team mom, parent volunteer, business sponsor, and booster for many of the sports organizations in the Valley from Houston to Palmer. I put on many markets on our property in Wasilla. Our last 420 event had 4 food trucks, 30 vendors, bounce houses, and dunk tanks. I'm a member of the Fairview Community Council in Anchorage and South Lakes Community Council in Wasilla. At the last meeting, it was discussed that there are actually 2 other dispensaries operating out of code because they were measured wrong. If there are 2 that were measured wrong, it's not that big of a stretch to say that mine was measured wrong too. If they are allowed to operate and I am denied, it feels very discriminatory. There have been so many regulations changes to our industry since it started that I feel that this code should evolve too. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Now, I do have a couple of follow-ups for you. I want you to explain to the board why you chose this specific location. Why did you purchase it?
I purchased it because it was in a commercial area. I would be able to operate the dispensary. We had hired Orion Construction, and we were getting ready to put on a new roof, renovate the property, tear down the dilapidated building, and try and put up some sort of other facility or a market there too. But I can't do anything until I have the ability to make money. And in the other units, I had no plans on operating them myself. We got the pool tables with the property, so I was hoping to allow other people business opportunities in there, just getting it ready for them.
Why don't you briefly describe for the board the property, how it's laid out, where you would be operating this marijuana retail facility, and how many other spaces there are in it?
The strip mall actually has 4 units to it. The one that I wanted was Unit 3. It's actually the smallest of all 3 of them. It's located right off of the Kenai Spur Highway, and it's a 4-lane highway with a turn lane in the middle. Behind it, I have other industrial buildings behind me. But it's definitely, right on the highway, a high commercial area, and so I thought it would be really good, and it was the only reason I purchased it was so that I could run the dispensary there.
You mentioned earlier a conversation with Linda Mitchell. When did that conversation occur, and can you tell us about it?
So originally, when we were looking at the property and meeting with a real estate agent, she didn't have the information, so I went into the city planning office, originally spoke with a gentleman, and then met with Lisa, her assistant. explained to her that I wanted to open up the dispensary, and she gave me all the information. I gave her all the information and said I just needed help measuring because I didn't know what the laws and boundaries were here. A few hours later, I got a call back from Linda Mitchell. She was highly excited, saying she had measured, that it was appropriate for what I was wanting to do. She told me to go ahead and move forward with my AMCO paperwork, and then once I had completed that, she would provide me the map that I needed to put in there for my CUP. And so after that, we moved forward.
And was that before or after you purchased the property?
That was before.
And how much money are you planning to invest in rehabbing the property?
Well, the roof was probably around $500,000 just to get a roof, and we were gonna change the facial front. If you see it now, it's really not that pretty. It's red and dilapidated and signs are falling off of it. And so I actually had a building plan. We had gone with a designer, and I was getting ready to meet with Orion's engineers when I kind of got the halt.
Now, would you have bought the property had Linda Mitchell told you it was within the buffer zone rather than outside of it?
No, I would have found a different piece of property.
And are you willing to comply, assuming these permits are granted, are you willing to comply with all federal, state, and local laws in running your retail marijuana facility?
Yes, absolutely.
And are you currently running a retail marijuana facility?
Yes, I have
Tell us about that.
3 facilities right now. I have one in Wasilla, and I had mentioned at the other board meeting that it is the largest in Wasilla, and I am the one who lives directly behind it. So I really am not asking for anyone to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. I own the one on 6th Avenue in Anchorage, the old Duck Pond restaurant. We renovated that, and it has a beautiful mural on the front of it, as does the Wasilla location. And then I opened the one at the corner of K Beach and Bridge Access. And again, we put up art murals and lights and did a lot of stuff to improve the property.
Is there anything else that you think the board should know?
Just that I'm a good person and I'm a really good community member, and I was looking forward to bringing commerce, not only mine, but hoping that I could help 3 other people open businesses too.
Does anyone on the board have any questions for Mrs. Millhouse?
Does that conclude your presentation, or?
Not completely, but
Okay.
while she's up here before we change seats.
Mr. Doffett?
And I guess why did you not go through the full CUP process prior to purchase the property?
Can you answer that?
I don't really want to say that. In 2023, my husband and I both got cancer. From the time when we originally purchased, or started the process of purchasing, there was about a 4-month period of time where we were doing research and didn't really have time for anything other than trying to figure out how we were going to take care of our health. As soon as we got that figured out, I filed the AMCO paperwork, filed the CUP paperwork, and I actually got my approval from AMCO and was still waiting for a response from Linda when I called her, and she had said that she was approving it, but then a gentleman had come into the office and freaked out on her and said that he had tried to apply for one there too and had been denied. So she had to halt the process for me.
So just for clarification, she said that you were going to start applying for it, but you would still have to go before the board for approval, correct?
Yeah. Yes, sorry.
I think my mic was off. I do have a question. It seems like you've got a number of businesses in Anchorage and Wasilla and which probably are heavily regulated areas. Key Beach, I'm not so, but opening those businesses, did you have to go through any conditional use permits or any hoops?
Yes. Not the one on K Beach because I purchased one from somebody else, but in Anchorage and the Valley, I did the same thing.
Okay, did you purchase those properties before you went through the conditional use permits?
Yes, I did. Sorry, the one in Anchorage I also purchased from somebody else, so that CUP was already in place.
It was already existing.
Yeah, I have to apply for stuff, but it was already in place. Sorry.
Any other questions? You may proceed.
So if you just want to state your name for the record and then what it is you're here to say.
I got you. We're on.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is James W. Browning. I would just, of course, like to speak on what this matter is, so thank you all for hearing me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Wes Browning, and I am the business partner that Ms. Millhouse is speaking of. In the last meeting, I was not present because we were unaware of the strong opposition to opening a cannabis retail store here in Kenai. Ms. Millhouse let me know the things that were said and the concerns and fears of what the establishment would be and bring. I myself will be the operating manager of this establishment if we are able to open. At any point in time, you can check on who I am and how I conduct business. I have been the sole operator and owner of High Bush Buds since July 2021. Before that, I was the operating manager since its open and conception in 2016. High Bush has always been in good standings, paid our taxes, and continued to do the things for our community. I am present, I am here in the community, and I love my community. I also, along with Dave Parrott, opened 5150 Audio, which is across the street from said property. Dave and I chose Kenai because we remember when Kenai had such great businesses and places to go and support. This is also the reason that I encouraged Mr. and Mrs. Millhouse to look in the community of Kenai. I have chosen to be with them in business standings to align myself with these wonderful people because I see how they conduct business. One, they're good people. The whole family is. They're also a family business. They own several dispensaries. Their sons and daughters are in the industry with them. Two, they give back to the community. They give back in very many programs. They're involved in the programs, and you can look and see all of this. Look it up for yourselves. Three, in all business aspects that they have been involved in, Wasilla, Anchorage, and other communities, they have only made the locations better, brought more businesses to the locations, and always been in good standings. At any point, you can check on Mr. and Mrs. Millhouse's business records to see in what standings they are. The allegations of being involved in the black market or being involved with the people behind them, being loud or obnoxious, is simply untrue. I myself would not be doing business with them if that was the case. Mr. and Miss Millhouse would only be an improvement to the community. I would not be involved with them if they were not people of great standings. You can look up who I am and how I conduct once again. So these codes, please look at these codes in question. So many codes have been changed. So many have been made, so many changes have been made to the codes because the marijuana industry was new when these things were brought about, these codes. We would be ignorant to think that the people that drafted this or these statutes thought of everything in the beginning, and these would never need to be adjusted or changed. AMCO itself has made several amendments to their statutes in the evolution of our industry. If nothing else, I am asking you to greatly consider the opportunities that this business will bring to Kenai. Please consider a code change or an amendment. Please look into who Troy Millhouse and Sandra Millhouse are and what they do for their communities. And please look into myself, James W. Browning, and what I do for my communities. If given the opportunity, the only things that will be improvements to that location, create more business that will draw more revenue and people to Kenai, and make sure that people are coming to Kenai to be involved in the things that we are doing. But thank you so much for hearing me out. I greatly appreciate it. That's all I have to say. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? Is it Browning?
Yes, sir.
Sir, did you have any involvement in preparing the, either of the applications?
No, sir.
Okay, you seem to be familiar with our rules and.
Very much so.
ordinances.
So I'm here and I operate High Bush Buzz, like I was saying. I drive past where that location is, and for me, I thought that it would be a good location. So when we were kind of looking at stuff and they were talking to me about spots, hey, y'all go look at that one, just because it had been vacant for so long. So, thank you.
At this point, we'll yield the balance of the time. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The appellant is yielding the time, so that gets us to the appellee. City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission, represented by the city attorney, Scott Bloom. Mr. Bloom, you now have 30 minutes to present your case.
Thank you, Board Chair Naxted. So first, I want to make sure that Ms. Millhouse knows that, at least from the city's perspective, administrator's perspective, we certainly are not under the impression that you would bring anything negative to our community. And we hope that if this place doesn't work out for you, that you can find another location in the city to put your energy and opportunity in to help this community. And if there's anything negative from the prior hearing, I hope you understand that wasn't from city administrator's perspective, but maybe other members of the public that testified. We're here before the Board of Adjustment, and the city council members are here sitting as the Board of Adjustment. Pursuant to 142290, the Board of Adjustment has the same powers as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So you're here not as council members, but you're here as a review board for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and as such, you have the same powers as the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's laid out in 142290. 1405010 is our zoning code that talks about the powers and duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the powers and duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission are to make adjudicatory decisions, such as for a variance or to grant or deny a conditional use permit for a commercial marijuana establishment. But that provision of code lays out that they have to conduct their review under the standards provided in city code. They can't make up their own rules. They can't do what they might want to do or feel in their heart is right. They have to follow the city code, just like this board now has to follow the city code, acting in place for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Ms. Millhouse and Mr. Brown both said that, hey, look, a lot's changed in the marijuana industry on a state level and a local level since its inception. And that's true. And they requested that maybe you should consider a code change or some sort of amendment to code. And that may be true too, but when you sit as this body, as this Board of Adjustment, reviewing the decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission and essentially stepping into their shoes, that's not an opportunity or a power you have now. That's something you can do later as an legislative decision by the City Council, but not something that you can do or consider right now. Unfortunately, from my perspective, this case is really easy. The first issue is a variance. 1420-180 provides what is needed for a variance. And it says that the commission has to find that all of the conditions, the prerequisites to an issuance of a variance are met before you can issue a variance. The third prerequisite is that the granting of a variance shall not authorize a use that is not a permitted principal use in the zoning district in which the property is located. A commercial marijuana establishment is not a principally permitted use in any zone. So a variance cannot be granted to allow a commercial marijuana establishment anywhere, because it's not a principally permitted use, and that is straight black and white law in 1420-180. The next aspect of this, that since we're dealing with both at the same time, is whether a commercial marijuana, a conditional use permit is appropriate. And we've looked at this as a city before, and in fact, this is not the first time that this property has been considered for a commercial marijuana establishment. In order to get a commercial marijuana establishment in the city of Kenai, you have to get a conditional use permit, and you have to meet the requirements for a commercial marijuana establishment, which set out buffers. In this case, we are buffering from the location of their business to the outer boundary of a recreational facility or ball field. The city council, or sorry, the Board of Adjustment already took this up, and that was it was case number BA 1603. So approximately 8 years ago, this was taken up. Ronald and Denise Isaacs looked at this location, same owner that Miss Millhouse purchased this property from. And, sorry, incorrect?
Incorrect. My name is Miss Isaacs. I am the party that is being spoken of.
When Miss Isaacs looked at what we commonly refer to as a Swanson property, it was the same person owned that property, not Miss Isaacs, as Miss Millhouse purchased it from. In that Board of Adjustment decision, which is public record and has dissuaded many other people from trying to locate a marijuana business at that location. On page 96 of your packet, it states that the board finds that the issue related to the buffer distances for both parcels containing ball fields turns on the meaning of outer boundary with regards to its use in KMC 1220-330F. If outer boundary means the edge of the ball fields themselves, then the Isaacs proposed business would be within the allowable buffer distance. However, if outer boundary means the closest edge of the parcel on which the ball fields are on, then the proposed use violates the 500-foot buffer requirements. The board finds that the city planner's measurements using the GIS system were sufficient given the circumstances. The board concludes that the discussion of buffer distances by the city council and city staff at the January 20th, 2016 council meeting, at which the relevant code section on buffers was enacted, clearly shows that it was the intent of the city council that the outer boundary was intended to mean the outer edge or boundary of the parcel on which the use buffered from is located. This conclusion leads to defining that the proposed business is located within the 500 feet of the outer boundary of the two parcels containing the ball fields and does not meet the buffer requirements. Ms. Millhouse wants to locate in almost the exact same facility. I don't know which unit it is particularly, but if you look back on page 47 of your packet to the map, the buffer distances measured, and these are just estimates using the GIS system. They're 322 feet from the Little League fields and 390 feet from the city's softball fields. So even if the location of the unit is slightly different, it's not going to affect these measurements. What Ms. Millhouse is essentially arguing, and I feel terribly about this, is that she was told by our planner, Linda Mitchell, that she could locate there. That's what she's asserting. And so based on that assertion, she bought the property. I'm going to argue that that was not a reasonable reliance on her part to purchase the property. But before that, I'm going to argue that even if that was true, that doesn't grant this board the authority to ignore city code and prior decisions precedent by the same body for a different outcome. Miss Mitchell, unfortunately, she left the city, and it was not the easiest to communicate with her anymore. But what I will say is that on page 82, I asked her if she could, in preparation for this hearing, I said, and even though I don't think it's relevant, because the board can't grant the variance or the conditional use permit, because to do so, you would have to violate city code. In case this is appealed, I want to get on the record that Ms. Mitchell said, and on page 42, she said, I informed Ms. Millhouse that it appears that the basic buffering requirements are met, but a conditional use is a discretionary permit, meaning there are no guarantees subject to meeting the approval criteria for approval. On page 83, I followed up with Ms. Mitchell because I had a different understanding of what had been said, and she said that she did mention, and this is on page 83, her email to me, I did mention to her that people usually place a condition on a purchase when a proposed use requires a CUP. Similar to the Salamantoff CUP on Kiana Lane, I suggested that they do the same thing because they needed a CUP. I was anticipating that she would submit for a CUP and wait for a decision before she closed on the property. Anytime somebody comes to the city and wants to do something on a property that requires a CUP, we always advise them to go through the CUP process first because there's no guarantees. It's not a black and white process. There's always discretionary. It's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission and review of the board whether somebody gets a conditional use permit for any type of business. So we always say, before you buy the property, because nothing's guaranteed, you never know who's going to show up in the public. You never know what points are going to be made. You need to get the CUP before you do it. Now, Ms. Millhouse has stated that she owns several commercial marijuana businesses. She's owned them for a relatively long time. She's been relatively successful at it, I'll assume, if she's growing her businesses. She is what is known as a sophisticated buyer. Okay? She knows that she needs to do her due diligence prior to purchasing a piece of property. Yet she got nothing in writing. The seller of the property had prior knowledge that a conditional use permit for a marijuana could not be located there based on the Isaacs dealings with them previously. That was a subject of the earlier Board of Adjustment decision. She was told that there was no guarantee. Instead, she took the risk on herself to go ahead and go forward. It sounds like there may have been some issues in her personal life or health-wise that caused her to move faster, and I can totally get that. But that doesn't mean that it forces the city to violate its code and grant a conditional use permit or a variance in violation of city code. Also, the decision itself, the board's decision, was public record. It's out there. It's not something that's being hidden from Ms. Millhouse. If she had inquired with anybody else other than Ms. Mitchell, we could have helped her understand why that's not a suitable location. Ms. Mitchell was pretty new to the city and hadn't dealt with a whole lot of these commercial marijuana establishments before. If she had spoken to anybody who operates a business in the city of Kenai, a commercial marijuana business, and asked them about that location, she would have been informed that it wasn't an appropriate location. Because this board has already denied the Isaacs the opportunity to do it, if you were to violate code, that would really result in an arbitrary and potentially discriminatory decision. Now, Ms. Millhouse has argued that the city's granted variances before, so to not grant a variance in this case would be arbitrary or discriminatory towards her. The city has never granted a variance for a commercial marijuana establishment. There is one location out north that was not reviewed by the city's legal department that the planner years ago, different planner, not Ms. Mitchell, somebody else, a prior planner, unfortunately it's been a revolving door in our planning department, mismeasured that. It wasn't a variance, the planner just mismeasured. The other one that I believe they're talking to is, speaking about is East Rip, which is next to Millennial Square. That was also subject of a Board of Adjustment decision, and the Board of Adjustment decided that that green strip at the time was not operated by the city and was not a ball field or a recreational facility. It was just open green space. Again, no variance was granted. Right or wrong on that decision, it wasn't appealed, but a variance was not granted. A variance has never and cannot be granted to allow a conditional use marijuana establishment because it's not a principally permitted use. Ms. Millhouse, back, as you can see in the emails on page 85 and 86, Ms. Millhouse was told by the city, and we thought at one time that she was gonna be looking for a legislative fix to her problem, to maybe petition the city council to review its marijuana code and make some changes to allow her to operate. And that's still available to her, whether this Board of Adjustment decision is in her favor or not. At any time, the city council, sitting as a city council, can exercise its legislative powers and change code if the city council thinks that's what's best for the city. But this isn't the forum for that, and this is not the forum to violate our city code. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Bloom, or actually the appellant for that matter, at this point? Board Member Dothit, I can tell you got something. Go ahead and turn on your light.
I guess it would be for the appellant. I get the verbiage right here. It was brought up, did the realtor nor the seller not disclose any previous history of other people trying to purchase the property to do the same business in the past?
No, and I specifically asked her to. I specifically asked the real estate agent too, and she said she didn't know anything about it. And the seller told me after I had handed her the cash in Oregon, that they produced a lease for a tenant in number 4 that had not been ever produced before too. So that whole situation I don't really feel good about either.
Go ahead.
That was it. I was just curious if it had been disclosed or not.
Actually, I had questions along the same line. Did you have a realtor, or was it the realtor for the sale of the property?
The realtor for the sale of the property.
But you were acting on your own?
No, I ended up having to hire a realtor because she wouldn't continue to communicate. She kept being vague, and I think that was her way of not telling me so that I would buy the property. As I said, I don't really feel good about how that all happened to me either.
So I understand, you entered in it with, you inquired, you didn't have a realtor, and then you hired a realtor, and the realtor that you hired that was helping you along, did they help you with what the next steps were, the ordinance?
No, because by that time Linda Mitchell had already told me that the facility would work, and so I started the process of purchasing it.
So, okay, I guess you hired a realtor, but then you, not fired her, but you just didn't need her or him any further? Is that, so that realtor didn't follow you through the whole process of purchasing the property?
No, not at all.
Okay. Board Member Dothit?
Just a quick question, I guess, back to the purchase of this. I'm going to assume this was a cash purchase and it wasn't within any implied,
Yes.
any implied warranties or conditions as is, where is, how is kind of a purchase?
Based on the condition of the property, I had looked at it and I knew what I was buying as far as the condition of the property, yes. And I did fly to Oregon with cash to pay for it, and I had to meet the seller at the bank.
There wasn't any contract saying that it was guaranteeing anything of the use of the property.
No, but that was the first question that I asked the Realtor when I met her. Would this location be okay for a retail facility? And her answer was, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. So she was pretty vague. Like I said, I had to hire a Realtor just to get in touch with her to buy it, so.
Council member, a board member.
Thank you, Vice Mayor,
Yeah,
Mr.
Chair.
Knack,
Yeah.
Chair. Thank you.
We'll have this figured out by the end of the,
I understand that the then planning director, Linda Mitchell, called you with measurements, and she said, according to the measurements I see, I think this will work for you. That was the information given to you, right?
Yes,
Okay, but then according to Ms. Mitchell's written testimony, she also said that that is conditional upon the granting of a special use permit, and there's a lot of variability in that process, and that you need, that being able to open a retail store is contingent upon getting that special use permit. I just want to make sure you knew that process before you closed on the property.
yes, ma'am. And the only question I asked when I went to the city was I needed to know about the dimensions of whether it was illegal. So that was pretty much the only thing I needed from them, because I can do the rest of the CUP, but I needed the map. So pretty much that was really the only thing I needed Linda's help with, and she. This facility will work for a dispensary, and I told her that is the only reason that I am buying it. And she said, yes, this will work.
But still, again, contingent upon getting the CUP.
The word contingent upon getting a CUP never came up. I absolutely asked if it was able to get a CUP at this location, and she said yes.
any further questions? Okay, that brings us back to the appellant. Mr. Moses, you have 10 minutes for rebuttal.
Actually, I guess with the board's permission, I'm comfortable just rolling on into closing arguments, if that's all right.
Okay.
And I'll be very quick. Listen. Yes.
Excuse me, can I have an opportunity for rebuttal or cross-examination of witnesses? I know you want to go on, but.
Oh, yes, I suppose if we're going to follow through, then Mr. Bloom would have opportunity for rebuttal, and then you'd have the closing arguments would be the next thing. Does that work for you? Okay. Okay, Mr. Bloom, now you have 10 minutes for rebuttal.
I'm happy to take a break.
Pardon?
You,
I have 3 people talking to me at the same time.
Could we just break for 5 minutes?
Oh, break for 5, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back on the record. Mr. Moses, are you going to secede your 10-minute rebuttal, or are you gonna, what would you like to do?
I guess since the planning department is planning to put on a little bit more evidence, I would like to ask a couple of questions of the representative of the planning department, if that's allowable.
To ask who?
I forgot your name, sir, but the representative of the planning department.
McRae?
McElroy.
McElroy? You know, I knew I probably pronounced your name wrong. McElroy. Absolutely. This is your opportunity.
Okay. Sir, you read in a staff report earlier. It's my understanding you're an interim director of the planning department, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you employed by the planning department when the relevant staff report was written?
As far as the one that went to planning and zoning?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You were. Did you work on that?
I did.
You did. Can you look at page, and I believe it is, I think it's the 500-foot buffer map, which I believe is page,
48, I think.
yes, that's correct. I don't, for some reason, have a little page number there.
49.
Are you with me?
Pardon me?
You're there, right?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand this completely for the record. The red area is the 500-foot buffer zone from the proposed marijuana facility, is that correct? And I just want to make sure, the red area itself, that really thick line, does not touch any of the actual ball fields themselves, is that correct?
Not the ball fields themselves, but the perimeter of the property line.
It touches a piece of the parcel, is that correct? Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions for you. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, yes, I will yield the rest of it. I apologize.
You conclude your rebuttal? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. Mr. Bloom, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. McElroy, I'll ask you a couple questions too regarding this. You were asked whether it touches the ball fields, and it doesn't touch the physical ball fields themselves, is that correct?
Correct.
Are kids, when they go to play sports at ball fields, do they leave the ball fields, or do they park in the ball fields, in the parking lots, stay with their parents?
By the parking lots.
And when kids are at school, are they always confined within the building or within the playground, or are they around those schools and within the on school property?
All over the school property.
And same with ball fields too, or other recreational facilities. They're not, these kids' use of the facility and reason for it isn't just confined to the ball fields themselves, to the physical fields, right?
Right. No.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay, you concluded?
Yep.
Okay. That brings us to closing arguments. Mr. Moses, you now have 5 minutes for closing arguments.
Thank you. So, I just want to begin with, the crux of the case here is that the 500-foot buffer zone was interpreted incorrectly. The variance itself is really just more of an alternative form of relief. Now, I will start by saying that there is absolutely no dispute here that the ball fields in question are a recreation or youth center as per the Kenai Code, so that's not in dispute. What is in dispute is how it's being measured. No one here is asking you, at least as sitting as the Board of Adjustment, to alter city code. You don't have that power as the Board of Adjustment. That's not what's being asked of you. And no one's asking for a charity case either. What we're asking is for you to apply the plain meaning, the plain language of the relevant Kenai Municipal Code. Yes, I will concede that the Board of Adjustment has previously interpreted that provision to mean touching a portion of a parcel versus the actual boundary of the recreation or youth center. But if you actually take a step back and think about that, that can lead to some wildly absurd results when you're evaluating future applications, which is why that was a mistaken ruling and it needs to be corrected today. The plain language does not include parcel. It says the outer boundary of the recreation or youth facility. At present, if you maintained that, which has actually not always been maintained, as we now know from the city's case, that there are at least 2 other marijuana facilities operating within 500-foot buffer zones. If you had a really, really large parcel of hundreds, thousands of acres, whatever it is, if it's the outer boundary is truly the parcel itself, you could be hundreds of acres away from a city-owned recreation or youth facility and still not qualify for conditional use permit under that current interpretation, which is why the reading of parcel into outer boundary was incorrect and why that needs to be fixed here today. You also need to measure consistently, and as you are aware and as the city, some Planning and Zoning Commission has conceded, prior marijuana retail facilities have been granted conditional use permits based upon measurements that they now say were faulty, but were presumably correct because the city was applying the code correctly at that point. So, and the irony is, we likely wouldn't be here today if Linda Mitchell had remained in her position, because the staff report presumably would have been written by Linda Mitchell, who would have said that, in fact, this particular piece of property was outside the 500-foot buffer zone. And yes, conditional use permits are conditional. They are subject to denial for a myriad of reasons. But if you read the staff's report here, which appears to have been adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission, it's purely based upon the 500-foot buffer zone. There aren't really findings from that commission that it should have been denied for any other reason. And for those reasons, I would submit to you that the conditional use permit should have been granted. And if you disagree with that, I would urge this body to remand it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to make appropriate findings other than the 500-foot buffer distance, which was applied incorrectly. And with that, I will yield the remaining minute and 20 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bloom, you have 5 minutes for closing arguments.
Thank you, Board Chair Naxted. I have to disagree with a couple things, and I think I'm in a little bit of a fortunate position because I'm very familiar with the city of Kenai, and I'm very familiar with this particular parcel that is oddly shaped. And it has come up in discussion a lot at the council level about the results of large parcels. We've talked about this, we've talked about legislative changes, and council has not chosen to change its rules. That's something that is not set in stone. At different council, different board members, or maybe council members can change their mind. And we can certainly, as council, you have the discretion to make the choice, to change the definition, to make it more lenient, so more locations are available for retail marijuana establishments in the city. But that's not what the council chose in 2016. It wasn't just the Board of Adjustments decision back in 2016 out of the blue to decide what outer boundary meant. Instead, the board went back and they looked at the legislative history and reviewed what council meant and what administration was proposing to council when they voted on it. It can lead to absurd results in some cases. I would argue that the Little League fields is not an absurd result, but because of the softball fields, because of the very weird shape of that property that almost has like an isthmus that's not used for recreational facilities, that is a little odd. But it's been known about. There's just not that many properties in the city of Kenai. That property has been looked at so many times by applicants and by council. And the reason why council wanted to establish outer boundary as the parcel line is because when you're talking about youth facilities, they're not always fenced off, or recreational facilities. There's not always fences around them. So to determine where it starts and ends is often difficult, but we can look at black and white and say it's the parcel boundary. And that is an easy decision to make. Does it meet the parcel boundary or not? Rather than trying to figure out where the ball field or athletic facility ends or stops. Look at Millennial Square, for example. If that were back at the time that it was granted, considered to be an athletic facility or recreational facility, where does that start and stop? There's no fences, there's no lines, there's no benches. Where does it start and stop? That's why council made the intentional decision when they enacted this legislation that it would be the parcel line. And I don't think that's inconsistent with other municipalities in the state of Alaska. The only other thing that I want to say is only one time has the city made a mistake on measurement. And I can promise you, if Linda was here, the result would be the same, because prior to any opportunity for a conditional use hearing, the Isaacs came in right away and said, hey, we applied for this. How come it wasn't that way? How come you told these people they could do it and they can't? And Linda was aware right away, based on these emails back in March, that she had made a decision, a mistake that was inconsistent with how the city measures its distances. So I just don't think that's a fair statement to say that if Linda was still here, the result would be different. If it was, I certainly wouldn't have done a good job at my job of making sure that the city presents a consistent and equal approach to its planning and zoning commission decision, or planning and zoning decisions. And that's all I have. Again, I think Ms. Millhouse would be a great operator. I hope she can find a location in the city to operate and to put her energy and investments. Again, what I will say is a conditional use permit is always discretionary in the city. It specifically says in city code that the granting of a conditional use permit is discretionary. She's a sophisticated buyer. She knows, she's been through the process. Linda Mitchell can't tell her that she'll get a CUP because she doesn't make that decision. It's the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. I'm sorry that this happened to you, but it's not our fault as a city. I think she needed to do more work, and there's not a remedy that this board can grant to her. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bloom. That concludes the arguments tonight. This board with motion will deliberate for adjudicative session. Do we have a motion to go into adjudicative session?
Chair Naxted, can I just clarify something? Did you want two separate closing arguments? Because I know that was sort of established at the beginning, or have you concluded both closing arguments?
I was under the impression both.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because originally we talked about
And you're good with the
two.
time you had?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
And Mr. Bloom?
The same, yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Board Member Askham?
I move that the Board of Adjustment adjourn to adjudicative session for deliberation.
Second?
Do we have a unanimous consent? Okay, we do. That closes the meeting. Thank you.